U.S. forces recently launched a new wave of strikes against Iranian military targets. The Pentagon confirmed hits on 4 Iranian drones and the bombing of a ground control site that was seconds away from launching a 5th. Officially, the administration characterizes these strikes as a purely defensive operation. The stated objective is to maintain an ongoing ceasefire and keep peace talks on track. Back in Washington, high-stakes cabinet meetings project a very different atmosphere. Administration officials express absolute confidence that a diplomatic victory is imminent, insisting that Iran is ready to concede. But there is a glaring contradiction here. Bombing a military site actively preparing to launch an immediate drone strike does not align with the narrative of an adversary who has surrendered. The White House's optimism relies heavily on conventional statecraft. They assume Iran will sign a binding deal, simply because the Iranian domestic economy is in freefall. This chart illustrates the scale of that collapse, tracking Iranian inflation against stable global baselines. With inflation spiking to 250%, the local currency has lost nearly all of its purchasing power, rendering their economic system practically non-functional. A relentless physical blockade compounds the internal crisis. Over 100 Iranian shipping vessels are currently sanctioned and stuck, costing the regime upwards of $20 billion in lost revenue. While Iran is starved of export revenue, the United States remains highly insulated. Since January, the U.S. has imported over 10 million barrels of crude oil from a new energy partnership with Venezuela. Domestic markets in the U.S. are hitting record highs, supported by a GDP larger than China, Germany, and India combined. In stark contrast, major Iranian industrial pillars like their massive steel companies have been physically attacked and completely shut down. Based on every conventional metric of statecraft and industrial output, the United States holds total supremacy. From the perspective of the administration, these numbers suggest a conflict that has already been won. To finalize a treaty, American negotiators are applying a rigid carrot-and-stick strategy designed to corner the regime into complete compliance. The non-negotiable prerequisite requires Iran to completely and verifiably destroy its stockpile of highly enriched uranium. To enforce this, the U.S. is holding billions in frozen Iranian assets. Those accounts remain entirely locked until the uranium is gone. Next is a strict geopolitical concession. The administration insists on stripping Iran of any territorial control over the Strait of Hormuz, maintaining it strictly as international waters, monitored by allied forces. Finally, the president introduced a diplomatic curveball, suggesting the deal depends on Iran's Arab neighbors formally joining a historic alliance, utilizing the framework established by the Abraham Accords. The approach relies on a combination of brute economic force and sweeping diplomatic ultimatums. It operates on the assumption that a sovereign state, when pushed far enough, will have no choice but to sign. But veteran military operators, including retired Green Beret Colonel Scott Mann, warn that this approach relies on a severe misreading of the adversary. This contrasts a top-down military with Iran's actual strategy, network-centric warfare. They rely on a decentralized matrix of proxy nodes. This allows individual cells to execute localized disruptions, keeping American forces occupied without providing a clear central target. We see this in practice with rogue guard commanders deploying small mosquito fleets. They lay mines in the Strait of Hormuz on their own volition, operating entirely off the official books of the Iranian diplomatic team. Further out, regional proxy forces like the Houthis operate in the Red Sea. They act as a critical pressure valve, capable of launching surgical drone strikes on international shipping vessels to maintain leverage. Because this military apparatus is built as a duplicitous, decentralized network, forcing government negotiators to sign a ceasefire in a boardroom will not stop the localized chaos on the ground. The confidence projected by the White House measures progress in inflation rates and barrels of oil, but it assumes those numbers translate into control over a decentralized enemy. During the 20-year war in Afghanistan, a similar pattern emerged between official reporting and the situation on the ground. Throughout that conflict, military leaders routinely testified to Congress that the Taliban was fractured and nearing total defeat, a conclusion drawn almost entirely from conventional success. Those optimistic reports ignored the ground truth. The Taliban did not need to win major battles. They simply used their own network-centric resilience to outweight the United States. Signaling a decisive competitive advantage is risky when facing an enemy that measures victory in basic survival, rather than quarterly economic growth. Bankrupting a national economy and destroying launchpads yields a strong bureaucratic victory, but dismantling a deeply embedded, decentralized network of proxy fighters is an entirely different war.